It's a sweet summer night, and you're at a party, which is fairly normal because times are good, the living is easy, and the wine is flowing like water. You step out to your balcony for a moment of privacy when you see the princess of your great city drunkenly stumble up to the massive gates that hold back the sea, and you see she's being urged on by a man in red. As she opens the gates, you can only stand there rooted in horror as the sea comes raging in to claim your home. You were in the lost city of Ease. All things considered, I don't think you could be blamed if your last moments you were having second thoughts about the whole system of monarchy as well. But first, hello, my name is Garvin, and I read things and natter about them on the internet for your entertainment. Today, we're looking at the mythical lost city of Ease, its story, and how that story changed over time. So, let's turn to Ease, also called Kir-Iz and Ville d'Ise, was, at least according to the story, located in medieval France, in Brittany, on the coast of a body of water called the Bas de Nardonnais. I hope that pronunciation was at least understandable. That was the best I could do. To be more specific, this was on the coast of a region in Brittany called Carnoët, and is here that a kingdom was ruled from the great city of Ease by a king named Gradlon. It was a fantastically wealthy city, and Gradlon's palace was built from cedar, marble, and gold, funded by the wealth of trade. And because of this trade, he was also able to fund lush gardens, parks with zoos with exotic animals that were open to all the citizens of this city. However, this city was built below the waterline, and had to be protected by a massive wall, or in some versions of the story, massive dikes, with a great sea gate that was opened at low tide to allow trade ships to come in and out. The gates could only be opened by a key that Gradlon carried with them, and as long as the gates were only opened at low tide, the city was safe and could profit greatly from sea trade. However, according to the story, Gradlon was also a warrior, as kings of that time needed to be, and he raided and made war on various nations to the north of the city of Ease. Nothing about him going south, maybe he just didn't like the summer heat. Now, depending on which version of the story you go with, this next event takes place somewhere between Ireland and Denmark, and I couldn't narrow it down any further than that. On one of these raids, Gradlon comes face to face with the love of his wife, the magician and warrior king Melgivon, who had the slight issue of already being married, but she fell in love with Gradlon at first sight. So to resolve her I'm already married issue, she helped King Gradlon kill her current husband. Also of note, although not a major detail in most of these stories, in some versions she is a fairy or otherwise not completely human, so just kind of keep that in mind. There are different versions on what happens after they get married, some claiming that she took Gradlon away into the fairy otherworld for a year, and when he reappears, he's riding her magic horse, carrying their daughter, very much alone except for that, and that magic horse is going to be important, but we'll get to him. Others claim that they did not go to the magic fairy realm, but instead took a very scenic route home to the city of Ease. So scenic it took them a year to get there, but they were having various adventures on the way, and then she died giving birth to their daughter. Others claim that she didn't die, but left him when he converted to Christianity. That's also something we'll get to in a moment. In all versions of the story, they do have a daughter named Dahut, and Gradlon loves his daughter greatly, maybe because she's all that he has left of his wife, or maybe just for her own sake. Either way, he allowed his daughter a great deal of freedom and power, especially over the city of Ease, and that's going to come back to bite everybody. But first, let's talk about that magic horse.
Look at my horse is amazing.
I regret nothing. The horse was named Morvac, which is Britain for seahorse, and he was coal black. The big thing, though, that we need to remember is that he could run on top of the water, and that is a pretty awesome power. And in some stories, he could also breathe fire, which just makes this horse amazing. And I want you to remember this horse and his abilities because they're gonna be important later, at least the running on water part. Now, in most versions of the story, Gradlon was converted to Christianity by Saint Gradlon, a founder of the first monastery in the region, and as far as I can find out, this saint was a real person who was born sometime after 460 AD and died, we believe, around 532 AD. He was the son of a prince of a Romanized British kingdom named Frigid, who settled in the area with his wife, a Christian holy woman named Gwen the Three-Breasted. I don't write this stuff, folks, I just tell you about it. Both of these people were Christian early figures who helped Christianize the region, and while Gradlon converted, his daughter, again named Dahut, or in some cases Ahiz, depending on the story, remained pagan. And perhaps to avoid familiar conflict, Gradlon allowed freedom of religion within his realm. Dahut herself was also known as a sorceress, which may not be surprising because of her mother, and I'm sure the magic horse also helped with learning magic abilities, honestly. Although most stories don't linger on her magic powers. There was one side story I found where she stuck horse ears on a king who was hunting for reasons I didn't understand, and he basically had to go through life with everyone making fun of him for having horse ears. What Dahut is mainly known for in this story, though, is for being a party girl. According to the story, she threw wild parties at night and took a different guy to bed each time. In at least one version I read, she made her bedmate wear a black satin mask that would strangle them to death once it went past midnight. And then she would throw their dead bodies into the sea as a sacrifice to the sea gods. Honestly, that sounds like something a good king or a father should put a stop to, but Gradlon just seemed to kind of shrug it off. Even though his buddy, you remember him, Saint Gradlon, would constantly tell him he needed to rein his daughter in, and call me a killjoy, but I'm going to side with the saint here. Now, the partying, I can take or leave. That's a personal thing. But I think we can all agree that a line should be drawn at murder. Also, letting the elites of your nation run wild never ends well. And man, I feel like I'm going to be looking back at that statement way too soon and just nodding my head sadly. Moving on though, one day a knight dressed all in red came to the city, and soon Dahut was passionately besotted with him, and when she finally lured him to her bed, she couldn't bear to make him wear the mask, the one that killed you. So unlike many, he survived the night. Good for him, terrible for the city of Ease. As they lay together, a storm raged outside, and Dahut bragged to him about how the walls and the gate would protect the city through anything. The Red Knight said it would be really cool to see the raging sea through the open gate, and he was sure that Dahut's magic could hold back the sea and protect the city. However, Dahut admitted that she didn't have the key to open the gate, only her dad had that, so it really wasn't something they could do, and the Red Knight goaded her into stealing the keys and opening the gate. As you can guess, her magic powers were not enough to hold back the entire ocean, and the sea came in to drown the city. Gradlon was sleeping in his palace, and when he was woken up by the saint, and seeing what's happening, he grabs his magic horse and makes a run for it, stopping to grab his daughter on the way out. I imagine that they met each other, she's running to the palace and he's riding out, and he just kind of goes, "Come here, kid," but that's just me. As King Gradlon grabs his daughter, his horse immediately begins to start sinking into the water, and Saint Gradlon yells to the king, "Throw your daughter to the sea. It's her fault the city's drowning anyways." King Gradlon refuses. This is his only flesh and blood, and he tries to push the horse further, but the horse only begins to sink deeper into the raging waters of the sea. And as the water comes up to his knees, the saint cries up to him one more time, "Throw your daughter to the sea," but King Gradlon can't do it. And as the horse begins to flounder in the waters, King Gradlon, according to the story, hears the voice of the Almighty himself commanding him to throw his daughter to the waves. And King Gradlon obeys, throwing his daughter to the waters, and at that point his horse is able to spring to the top of the waves and ride to safety, so that King Gradlon and Saint Gradlon are saved. But as they look back, they see the Red Knight change into the devil among the drowning towers of the city, capering around the waves, waving the key to the gates over his head in mockery as he sinks into the sea. King Gradlon rides to the city of Quimper and rules from there, a sadder man, but a survivor. Dahut was said to have been turned into a Morgan, a kind of mermaid-like creature that tempts fishermen to their doom, and it's said, if you're on the water in the night, you can sometimes hear church bells ringing from the bottom of the bay. It is also claimed that on the day Paris sinks beneath the waters, the city of Ys will rise again, and the first person to see the church spires and hear the bells will become the rightful monarch of that ancient kingdom. So that's the story as it's come down to us, but it's not the original story. In fact, a lot was added after the medieval era. Now, I'm going to put the names of the French works on screen because I can't find reliable pronunciation guides for some of these names, and I'd rather not guess at the pronunciation. Some of my English pronunciation is pretty iffy as it is. I don't want to try mangling French, so pardon me, I'm sorry about the inconvenience there, but just check out the screen for the name of these works. The earliest written form we have shows up in 1480 by Pierre Lebald, a French priest and historian known for writing about the history of Brittany. And while Gradlon is mentioned as the king of the city, it doesn't say anything about a wife or a daughter in this version of the story. Dahut, his daughter, is first mentioned by Albert Legrand, a Breton member of the Dominican order, and he published his work in 1680. We are well past the Middle Ages at that point. In 1707, there was a version published that added the part about church bells ringing from the depths in the middle of the night, which, if you watched my video on the lost city of Vignetta, that might sound a little familiar, doesn't it? In 1839, a collection of songs from oral traditions added the detail that Dahut was urged onto her doom by a lover, and an 1844 collection of tales from the local area released by Emile Silvestre turns that lover into the devil. And Malgiven, Gradlon's wife, was introduced in 1890 in an essay by Edouard Chouret. All these were tied together in a 1926 work by Charles Legault, a French poet who won the gold medal in the Olympics for his art, because from 1912 to 1948, art competitions were part of the Summer Olympics. I did not know that until I started the research for this video, and I had to share that. The first English version of the story that I can find is written in 1917 by a Scottish folklorist named Lewis Spence, and the fantasy writer Poul Anderson published the 4-volume novel King of Ys. There are the Japanese video games, which are very, very loosely inspired by the legend, and if I remember right, in some of the video games, the islands are floating in the sky, so I want to stress the very loosely part here. The story of Ys is interesting because a lot of the embellishment, especially the moralistic parts of the story that are usually considered a medieval preoccupation, aren't added to this story until we're almost to the modern age, or in the modern age. And it's a good example of how there is no bright line in the sand where mythologies stop changing. They just keep developing over time. For example, even today, stories like the 2020 graphic novel Daughters of Ys put a new spin on it, focusing on Dahut's perspective in the story. Now, to shift gears a little bit, I do also enjoy looking at archaeology, and there is some archaeology in the area that may be somewhat related. So, archaeologists have found structures under the water close to the area where Ys was claimed to be. These structures date from the Neolithic. They're near Sin Island, and there are a series of walls that are about 6 foot tall, and if I remember right, there's several hundred feet altogether of these different walls, and they could have served as dams or fish traps or something else. We're not entirely sure. We are sure that these structures date back to roughly around 7,000 years, give or take, and they would have been above sea level at the time they were built. So it's entirely possible that sightings of these structures by people in ships inspired the story, even though these stone structures were never part of a city. And that's something I can go into more detail in its own video. But it's here I'm going to end this week's video, and I hope you found it informative or at least entertaining. If you did, please leave a like, a comment, or consider subscribing, as that helps me in my eternal battle against the dread Lord Algorithm. Terror be on his name. You can also join the Everwise at my Patreon, where $1 a month gets you a vote on upcoming content like this video. Next week, as per my patrons' vote, we are going to take a look at the Alexander romance, the mythology around Alexander the Great, and we're going to start by taking a brief look at the real life of Alexander the Great. I hope you'll join me for that, but until then, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and of course, keep reading.